Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm Rick Fussell in this Thin Grain Workshop. Our neighbors just finished building an outdoor deck using some composite decking from one of the big box stores. They were kind enough to give us their leftover decking. And in today's video, I'm going to be repurposing that decking and building some doors for our outdoor kitchen. That's coming up next here at Thin Grain Workshop. So this is the outdoor kitchen I built back in 2015. At the time, I made the cabinet doors out of pressure-treated wood and stained them. But as you can see, over the years, they've absorbed a lot of moisture, especially down here on the end grain at the bottom of the doors. So today, I'm replacing them with something that should hold up much better outdoors, using leftover Trex decking material that our neighbors were kind enough to give us. So my left and right cabinet openings measure about 28 3/8 by 29 5/8, and the center opening comes in at 40 inches wide by 20 5/8 tall. Each opening is getting 2 doors, and I'm sizing everything with about an 1/8 inch reveal all the way around so the spacing stays nice and even. I'm going to start over here at the miter saw by cleaning up one end of the Trex boards first. Then I'll rough cut all the pieces for the door frames, the smaller frames for the side openings, and then the wider set for the center section. With all the frame pieces rough cut, I'll head over to the table saw and resaw the Trex boards down to about 7/8 of an inch. I'm using a feather board here to keep everything tight against the fence and feeding consistently through the blade. Now technically, I could have skipped this step and just ran the full 1-inch board straight through the planer down to 3/4 of an inch, but I figured this would save a little wear and tear on my planer blades. Once everything is planed down to a final thickness, I head back to the table saw and rip all the frame pieces down to 2 3/8 of an inch wide. Back over at the miter saw, I'll start by cutting a 45-degree angle on one end of each board. Then leaving the saw set at 45 degrees, I'll flip the boards around and use a stop block to cut all the frame pieces to final length. For the side cabinet doors, the top and bottom pieces are cut to 13 15/16, long point to long point, and the side pieces come in at 29 3/16. For the center doors, the top and bottom frames are cut to 19 11/16, and the side frames are cut to 20 1/4. Next, I'll drill out pocket holes into each end of the side frame pieces so we can start assembling the doors. Using a little CA glue and activator, I can quickly hold the miters in place while driving the pocket hole screws. Now, one important thing when working with Trex or other composite materials is to pre-drill the screws first. Since this material behaves more like plastic than wood, pre-drilling helps prevent the joints from spreading apart and gives you a much tighter fit. When installing the pocket screws, I found it worked best to drive them in about halfway first, then back them out to clear the material, and then drive them home the rest of the way. Next up are the panel pieces for the doors. I'll start over at the miter saw by cutting all the panels down to their final lengths. For the left and right cabinet openings, the panel pieces are cut to 24 1/2 inches long, and for the center opening, they're cut to 15 1/2 inches. Then it's back to the table saw where I'll remove one of the rounded factory edges from the Trex boards first. After that, I can reference that clean edge against the fence and rip the panels down to the final width, 4 1/2 inches for the side doors and 5 inches for the center doors. While I'm already at the table saw, I'll go ahead and resaw all the panel pieces down to about 7/8 of an inch thick. And just like with the door frames, I'll run everything through the planer down to a final thickness of 3/4 of an inch. Next, I'll drill pocket holes into the ends of each panel board along with pocket holes down one side so the panels can be fastened together. Before final assembly, I'll dry fit everything to make sure the panels seat tightly inside the frames. I didn't have any blue exterior pocket hole screws on hand, so instead I'm using 1 1/4 inch deck screws for this build. And just like before, I'm pre-drilling every hole first, driving the screws in halfway, backing them out to clear the material, and then sending them home the rest of the way. Next up is installing the door hardware. For this build, I'm using some standard gate hardware, and I'll leave links down in the video description. I'll position the hinges about 2 inches up from the bottom and 2 inches down from the top of each door. To keep everything consistent, I'm using a simple 2-inch setup block as a positive stop, and then marking all the hole locations with an awl. Next, I'll pre-drill all the hinge holes using an 1/8 inch drill bit. Now the hinge screws are only 5/8 of an inch long, so I didn't have to worry about drilling all the way through the doors. Wish I could say the same thing about the lock screws. With the doors laid out, I'm using an 1/8 inch spacer to keep the gap even between the doors before installing the latches. Then I'll mark and pre-drill those holes just like I did for the hinges. Since these screws are 1 1/4 inch long, I raised the doors up off my outfeed table so I wouldn't accidentally drill into it. But even then, the screws still protruded through the back side a little, so I came back with a grinder and cleaned everything up flush. Now I'll just repeat that same process for the remaining sets of doors. So directly below the grill is a small access panel for the drip tray. The opening measures about 3 inches by 46 inches, so I simply cut a piece of Trex down to size for the cover. I still had some leftover hardware from my outfeed table build, so I decided to reuse one of the drawer pulls and make this panel a simple friction fit, so it can be removed anytime the drip pan needs cleaning. Using my hardware positioning jig, I laid out the holes to center the handle on the panel, drilled them out, and installed the pull. And with that, the doors were officially complete. Next up was removing the old doors. And while I was at it, and because I knew the supervisor would also make me eventually, I decided to freshen up the front of the outdoor kitchen with a new coat of paint. Once the paint dried, I could finally start installing the new doors. I'm using an 1/8 inch spacer to maintain an even reveal all the way around each door before fastening the hinges in place. Since the kitchen is finished with stucco and cement board, I pre-drilled the holes using a masonry bit and then drove the screws back into the wood studs behind it. Overall, I'm really happy with how these doors turned out. The old pressure-treated doors lasted a pretty long time, but using Trex this time around should hold up a whole lot better in the Florida weather, especially down near the bottom where the old doors kept absorbing moisture. And honestly, I like the cleaner, more modern look these give the outdoor kitchen too. What makes this project even better is that almost all of the material was repurposed from leftover decking that otherwise would have ended up in a landfill. Now you might think this is the end of the project, but what about our neighbors? After all, they were kind enough to give us all this leftover Trex material, and I couldn't finish this video without making them something too. So next, let's build them an outdoor planter box. So over at the miter saw, with my stop block set to 18.5 inches, I'm going to cut 12 pieces that will make up the sides of the planter box. Next, I rip a fence picket down to 1.5 inches wide, and here at the miter saw, I'll cut those down to 14.1/8 inches long. I'll need a total of 8 pieces, 2 rails for each side. Then over at the table saw, I'm removing the backside ribs from both edges of the Trex boards. This will let the panels fit together cleanly at the corners during assembly. Next, it's time to build the sides. I'll lay out the 3 panels per side and use the fence pickets as a top and bottom rail. To keep everything tight during assembly, I'm clamping the panels together first before attaching the rails. The top and bottom rails are spaced about 1.5 inches from the ends. Using 1.5 inch brad nails to temporarily hold everything in place, I'll pre-drill and countersink the holes before fastening the rails permanently with 1¼ inch deck screws. Then I'll just repeat that same process for all 4 sides. To make sure everything lines up perfectly, I'll trim all 4 panels to a final height over at the table saw using a miter gauge. Once all the sides are exactly the same, I can start assembling the planter box. I'll clamp 2 sides together, pre-drill the holes, then use actual Trex deck screws to fasten the corners together. That completes the main box. Next, using the bottom rails as cleats, I'll install 2 Trex boards across the bottom to support the plant while still allowing for drainage. Now it's time to build the top frame. Over at the table saw, I'll rip the 4 frame pieces down to 2 3/4 inches wide. Then I'll resaw and plane them down to a final thickness of 1/2 inch. Back at the miter saw, I'll cut a 45-degree miter on one end of each board, flip them around, and cut them to a final length of 18 5/8 inches long point to long point. That gives us about a 1-inch overhang all the way around the planter box. To assemble the frame, I'm just using CA glue and activator to hold the miters together. Then with the frame centered on the planter and the overhang set evenly all the way around, I'll fasten it in place using 1.5 inch brad nails. And that's it, a simple outdoor planter box built entirely from repurposed Trex decking.
Well, that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then please leave it a thumbs up and please share the video. It really helps out the channel. If you're new to the channel and you like DIY and woodworking projects, then I highly recommend that you smash that subscribe button. It's free and painless, and I'd also ask that you ring that bell icon. That way you can be notified of all our upcoming videos. To all you existing subscribers, I really appreciate all the support that you give this channel. Now I'll leave links in the video description below to any tools and equipment that I might have used on this build, and I appreciate you spending some time with me in the workshop today. I'm Rick with the Ingrain Workshop, and as always, have a wonderful day and God bless.